We're going to continue here with part 3 of our presentation series. Please make sure that you listen to part 1 and part 2 before you listen to this, because it will help you to understand how we're sure that, how all of this leads us to believe that we have a severe problem in our water sources, the county, the city, and groundwater, including wells. And so it's very important that you understand what we've, shared with you in parts 1 and part 2. And we'll probably do an extension of this part 3 a little bit later. In part 3, we're going to discuss why all the hoopla over the water. Do we have a county water problem? Red flags in the county water. Do we have a city water problem? Red flags there. What about our shallow and or deep wells? How far is this problem? Our attempts to get records from the city of Waycross, our request to the state attorney general's office to intervene on our behalf, and then the other thing is, why are these records important? Because we have some records online. When we started looking at the well water, one of the things we wanted to look at were the chemicals that can cause these different types of cancers. Radiation was one of those chemicals. We found radiation in the Gilchrist Park well, and this radiation is gross radiation. This was the highest location to initially show gross radiation. So why is that of concern? Because it could be receiving groundwater contamination from the CSX plume, which, as we showed earlier, their documents say flow south, which would flow into this well. The Emerson Park well, which was also a county well, the radiation was below 3 in the 2004 documents. So we went back as far as we could go online, which was 2004, and the highest level to first receive radiation was in the Gilchrist Park area. So what kind of radiation? The radiation that was showing up in the Ware County water was not the typical radium or uranium. Okay, so when you go to that site, if you look at gross alpha excluding radon and uranium, radon and uranium are the typical naturally occurring radiations that may be available or that may get into water or drinking supply. The figures that we are showing you do not include radium and uranium. Okay? So the next question is, what kind of radiation is in our water? This slide basically talks about the radiation in the Ware County water, but it actually really focuses on a lack of records. So we see during 2005 here, 3/11/2005, this Gilchrist Park, which was a county well, had reported the highest 7 PCI for radiation. We have no records for that location until 2010 again. Now, our first cancer cluster, which included the moms, the children of the moms who taught at Ruskin Elementary. That school we know was on county water. If we keep in mind that the toxicologist told us that if they were under, 5 years of age when they got their cancers, that they were probably exposed during the womb. So we kind of backdated, to figure out when these children would have been exposed. The periods of times for exposure would have been between 2006 and 2009. There are no water records available online for Gilchrist Park between March of 2005 and August of 2010, which includes this time period when these children would have been affected. There are no water records available online for Emerson Park for March 2005 through September of 2012. Radiation, even in low doses, causes sarcomas and lymphomas. Okay? So, this first group of children, remember, they were mostly lymphomas, but there were 2 sarcomas in that first batch of children. After this long period of receiving no records on that Gilchrist Park well and the Emerson Park well, then in 2011 we start getting records again, and the Gilchrist Park well hits the highest of 13 PCI, and this does not include the naturally occurring radium or uranium, which is another 4. Now remember, the federal standard for radioactive material is 5 PCI. So now we have hit over 3 times the legal limit. But what else is interesting is all across the board at all of these locations we see that the radiation levels have increased. But the highest one is still at the Gilchrist Park, which was also the first location to show high levels, which makes me wonder if it's receiving, groundwater from the CSX plume. Also, I want you to just notice here, well, we'll talk about that later. We printed a copy of the record that we could get online for the 2011, and you can see this gross alpha is 13 PCI. Again, that does not include the radium nor uranium. So the radium level, 226, was 4 PSI. And then this is the second page, which online they always combined. There's radium 226 and 228, and they combine those and give you a combined total. So the combined total of those radiums are 4 PSI. But the non-radium, non-uranium was 13 in this Gilchrist Park well. In addition, in the Ware County water data, we also found that there were high lead in certain locations. So the lead levels were twice the maximum contamination level, which MCL stands for maximum contamination level. That's the most that they're allowed to have in the home. So the maximum contamination level is 15 UG, and there were locations that had 34 UGs. If we're seeing lead and radiation, which is not the naturally occurring kind of radiation, in finished water, what other chemicals are there? What did the water look like before it was treated? Was there proper processes for treating them? None of these records are available online. This slide shows in 2007 that we had 11 UG, which was not up to the maximum contamination level, but it was rising, and this was in finished water. And this is in 2007. This water record was 2013, and it shows that the lead in the county water has risen to 13 UG per liter. Remember, the maximum contamination amount is 15. So concerns are, when they look at maximum contamination amounts, when they derive those figures, they're deriving them based on a single chemical. So if you were exposed to just lead and nothing but lead, what's the maximum amount that should be in your drinking water? However, when you combine chemicals, for example, radiation and lead, what does that cause? That means the maximum contamination level should be going down because it becomes a health concern. This one is the most recent we have available for lead, and that was on 6/10/2015, and there were 34 UGs per liter. That is double the maximum contamination level. So we went from the slides before that had under the contamination level to, in just 2 years, we went to double the contamination level. When we are talking about areas of concern like we have in our community, the testing has to be more frequent. To make that big a swing in 2 years is alarming, to say the least. Now we're going to look at the radiation in the Waycross Water Department data. So this is available online. You can go to the regular Georgia site, georgiadrinkingwater.net site, and pull up all the stuff yourself, or we actually save some of it to a Google's Doc for you. All of the city and the county wells show radiation. This is important. As opposed to Nahana and Blackshear, if we look at theirs, in their finished water, they have no contamination. In our city water, we're having contamination. In our county water, which is higher than the city water, we're having contamination. So the city well, it looks, from what we can tell online, they don't break theirs down into like different wells. Everything, all the data for the city calls it Alice Street plant. Okay? So back in 2006, there was 4 psi. In 2010, it drops down to 3 psi. Now, if you look between 2006 and 2010, there was actually no data available. So we have a big gap right in here. But what's interesting is somewhere they have taken a well offline. I'm wondering, did they take this well offline in this period? What made them take this well offline during that period of time? When they took it offline, is that what brought this down? If so, then why are we rising up again? Because these, see, this is 2011 here, we're jumped up to 6 psi, and now, and the last one that we have available is 12/8/2014, and it was up to 8.46 psi. And remember, this is finished water data. They have taken a well offline. They don't give us information as to why that well was offline. On this slide, we continue to talk about the radiation in the Waycross Water Department. The 2 city wells came offline. One was within a 1/4 of a mile of CSX on the north side of CSX, and one was at the industrial park, and it was very near the GATX. We don't know when exactly or why these wells came offline. But even after they appear to have come offline, the radiation numbers continue to grow. So here's the CSX in-town wells, and this is the industrial park. Now, if we notice, the second cluster, which includes these rare rhabdomyosarcomas, they were primarily on city water, and their exposure time would most likely be between 2008 and 2012. It's interesting to note that the highest online records peaks across the board during this period of time. So between 2008 and 2012, we have a peak all across the board in all the water systems. I want to just re-emphasize here that the radiation that we're talking about in the Waycross water is not radium what would they normally term as radon or uranium, which are the naturally occurring ones. What kind of radiation is present in our water? These are pieces of information that the community needs to know. Again, I want to emphasize here with this slide, this is an actual screenshot of what's available online. This is the 12/8/2014 data, and the gross alpha excluding radon and uranium was 8.46. Okay, so even after they have taken this well offline, or these wells that they've taken offline, which we don't know why, this radiation that is present continues to grow and increase. This is the second page of that same report, and so this is just showing you what the radium totals were. So the gross alpha that we looked at a minute ago, remember, excluded radium, which is normally called radon, and uranium. This is the figure, the 3.80 is the figure for the radium, which are the naturally occurring radiation. Some other thoughts about the Waycross water data. The CSX, there's some CSX documents that state that the largest or the highest amount of contamination that they've ever had has been reported in the years 2013 and 2014. So I'm kind of interested in knowing how does that correlate to data that we're not seeing in the Waycross and Ware County water. The second thing that's of interest to me is the city water system radiation numbers continue to increase despite the fact that they've taken a well offline, and despite the fact that they say that their well is 750 feet deep. Well, why are these numbers going up? Why can't they control the amount of radiation that's in the water? The next thing that is important is, and the next thought is, we're now seeing increases in the entry water at the Okefenokee Golf Club. So are these chemicals spreading out? You know, who is going to take care of these smaller systems, these smaller community wells? Who's going to, they don't have elaborate systems to be able to handle radiation and remove radiation from that water. Who's going to pay for those systems? Who's paid for the fact that we've had to take 2 wells offline? You know, those are things that we need to be considering. We don't know what kind of radiation this is. We know it's not radium-223 and 226 or whatever it is, but we don't know what kind it is, and different radiation, different types of radiation are more toxic than others. The next point is these figures are all alpha radiation, but we don't have any data on the beta and the gamma radiation. But I guarantee you that the city has that in those documents that they don't want us to see. The next thing is the lead. You know, our Waycross lead figures are not as high as the Ware County lead figures, but still, you know, and they're not above MCLs, but the fact still is there that what kind of health implications are there when you combine lead and radiation? The next thing is that's important for us as a community is we need to know what other kind of chemicals were showing up in high amounts during these periods of time when they're not providing any records. And last but not least is why the city wells, being so close to known contaminated properties, have not been required to test for dioxins, herbicides, and PAHs. Now they'll come back and they'll say, oh, well, we just tested for those. Well, they tested for those after I raised Cain about them. But they're still not giving us the entry water figures and the tests that they did for PAHs. They supposedly did one in 2013 after I raised Cain about the fact that it hadn't been tested, and it was so prevalent in our community. So they tested for one of the chemicals, benzene pyrene, but they didn't test for the rest of the PAHs. And that test that they did do, they let Tyndall do, and Tyndall used the wrong method of detection. And so that method that they use can actually provide false negatives. You know? So then they wound up, after I brought that to the city's attention, because this is one of the only records that they've given us, after I brought that to the city's attention, then they sent the report off to someplace else and tested for the one chemical, benzene pyrene, and it was safe, which I'm glad there was none detected. However, that's 2 years later, 2 years after, you know, we start noticing a problem. They should be testing these chemicals on a regular basis. Here's our lead figures for 2005. So 8/11/2005. This is on the city system. Okay. So it was at 13 UGs per liter. Remember the MCL, the maximum contamination amount for lead was 15. So it hadn't hit that, but you still have people being exposed. It's almost to that. And they're being exposed in combination with other chemicals. Now we see in 2013 that we have a big drop. So the lead has gone from 13 down to 4.8, which is probably a result of the well that they took offline. But what made them take the well offline? Those are all questions we need answered. So what have we done to try to get the water records? Back in 2013, we met with the city of Waycross and we asked for water records. We initially asked for 7-out documents and the water records. They provided us information on 7-out, but they never would provide us with the water records. In June of 2014, Deborah Nolan and I met with Director Turner. We asked for these water records again. We were told that they would be provided. They were not provided. November 14th, 2015, Judy Nation sent an email to the city of Waycross requesting those documents. And her city commissioner, who was Diane Hopkins, reported back to her on November 15th that she would see what she could do to get those documents. Those documents were never provided. I had an email exchange on December 2015 with Larry, who is responsible for, he's a head over ESG, which is our water contractor. He never provided them. February 3rd and February 9th of this year, we made 2 formal requests again to the city of Waycross. They never responded at all, totally ignored us. On March of this year, we sent a request to the State Attorney General's office and asked them to intervene on our behalf and help us obtain these records. We got an email back from them last Monday, where they had sent a letter to the city of Waycross asking the city to provide us with the cost or the documents, or to give them a reason why they are not providing those documents to us. They have 10 days to respond. Okay, so let's recap on the water situation with Ware County and Waycross. It seems like there's a correlation between the radiation levels and the sick children. So in other words, the children in the county that had access to county water got sick first, and the county wells showed radiation higher first. The children, as the radiation levels in the city of Waycross grow, then so does the cancer cases of the children in the city of Waycross. The reports from the time of 2006 to 2010 are not available online. That's what we're requesting. The radiation was not radium or uranium, and those are the natural occurring. I mean, there was some radium and there was I don't know about uranium. There's no uranium reported, but there was radium. But the figures that we have been discussing do not include those naturally occurring compounds. So is this radium and radiation, not radium, is the radiation working alone or in tandem with other chemicals? Remember, the PSI, the maximum contamination level, is 555. Why are we still going over? These people, we have already been contaminated long enough. They need to get this thing under control. Radiation can cause all types of cancer. But additionally, this information is indicative that one of our sources or one of our pathways is through wells that are in the county on the Gilchrist Park well. So it's possibly getting contamination and that down into the well and down into the aquifer, and it's spreading to our other wells. Or either there's some kind of contamination that's getting, that's so bad and it's getting so deep that it's hitting all these other wells too now, which is, I guess that's a possibility. But that source, we need to focus on that source. Most of the available data is finished water data. We must be able, we've been paying for water in the city of Waycross forever. They should supply us these records free, not charge us either. The other concern is how toxic are the private deep wells. That's a huge concern because people think that they're doing something good because they've dug down into a deeper aquifer, 250 to 400 feet deep, and they think they're safe. Well, obviously that might not be the case. So we need to figure out what's going on. The best way to look at that is to have those entry water records. We can see how much contamination was there before it was treated. The other thing that these chemicals, and I'll talk a little bit about this more, but these chemicals are toxic, more toxic when they're heated up and you heat them up in water, in like a shower, than they are just drinking them. It's because they said that they get into your nose and your mouth and your lungs, and anyway, so they say they're 100 times more toxic. Manor, the next point is Manor has not been tested since 2006. What's up with that? What are the health implications of radiation in our water? Now let's just kind of recap. So the water would have been contaminated in Ware County, Waycross, and deep wells around it are presumed to have contamination. We're still receiving radiation in the city of Waycross's water, in the county's water, and of course the wells are still receiving it. Well, radiation has its place, but there are no safe levels of exposure, period. None. So they all run risk, and they all run risk of malignancies. So when we already have children in our area who are receiving special treatment for radiation, and on top of that, we're giving them daily doses. We're all taking daily doses of radiation. This is totally unacceptable. It's got to stop. And then the third important point is people in our community need immediate care. You don't get radiation exposure and not be given the opportunity to get care. And by withholding these records and people covering up stuff, they're assisting in hurting other people. Even if they don't feel like, or even if they feel like they've contained the problem and it's over or whatever, that's not true. Radiation, once it's in the body, it breaks down in the body, and there are a lot of different processes that go on. And so these people, whoever know about this, they need to come forward. We need to understand what's going on, and we need to get our community fixed. What can you do? Most importantly, you can attend the availability session March the 15th. And speak to the CDC ASTDR representative, which will be Leanne Bing. Tell her your concerns. Tell her concerns about your water. Tell her concerns about your family's health, friends that you know, the children. And this is not just for, they're not coming just because of the children's cases. Remember, we use that as a focal point to let them know that we had a problem. But now it's time to tell them about all of the problems. It's very important that you go. I want you to remember that this meeting may be designed by some people there to convince you that everything is okay. So, just be on guard. The next thing you can do is call the CDC, the EPA, and your federal and state representatives and tell them that we want independent testing in our area. Then I wish that you would call your city officials and the county officials, and we need to demand that all requested water records be made available for us to review. And I personally think they ought to make them all available online, not miss a one of them. And the next thing is, even though we're asking federal governments to do some independent testing, we think that you ought to support our local fundraisers, because in the past, like in Flint, there was one federal agent or one federal person and one state person who told everybody that everything was okay. And because they were supposed to be experts, everybody believed them. Well, I don't know that we have that problem on the federal level. I think we may have that problem in the city level, and I think we may have that problem in the state level. And because people are experts, they can tell a lie and everybody believes them. So we think that it is important for the community to do their own fundraising and to have some independent testing along the way, just to make sure that everything is correct and accurate and above board. Because nothing is more important than the safety of the community. If the people's health, if it goes bad, they can't work, they can't pay taxes, they can't do all of these things that make for a good, thriving community.